Chapter 4: A One-Armed Adventurer. The first group to explore the Grand Canyon from end to end was led by John Wesley Powell in 1869. Powell had been a soldier in the Civil War. He had lost his right arm in battle. Powell's men always referred to him as the Major. Powell was a geologist. He was interested in the study of rocks and the Earth's layers. He was convinced that the Grand Canyon offered a great opportunity to study millions of years of Earth's history. He kept a detailed journal of everything he saw. He took a group of 9 men exploring in 4 wooden boats. They started on May 26, 1869, on Utah's Green River. They had enough supplies for 10 months. Within the first month, 1 boat was wrecked and half of the supplies were lost, so they were always short on food. One of the men quit and went home. Powell and the others continued in the remaining 3 boats. Early in the trip, Powell narrowly avoided a fatal fall. On July 8th, Powell and another man named George Bradley decided to measure the height of the cliffs above the river. Even with just 1 arm, Powell had climbed many cliffs before. So had Bradley. They took no ropes or safety gear with them. Powell and Bradley made steady progress until they were about 600 feet above the river. Suddenly, they began to have more difficulty finding a route to the top. Powell was leading. He edged out onto a narrow ledge and saw a place to hold above his head. With his 1 arm, Powell stretched and grabbed the rock. However, he quickly realized that he was trapped. If he let go of the rock, there was nothing else for him to hold on to. There was no way to go up or down. Powell's muscles began to cramp. Bradley had no time to go for help. He had to act quickly to save Powell. Luckily, Bradley found a way to reach a ledge above Powell. He leaned over. Right away, he realized that Powell was too far below him. He couldn't reach down to catch Powell's wrist. Bradley had a sudden, desperate plan. He had climbed the cliff just wearing a shirt, pants, and long underwear. He stripped off his clothes and dangled the long underwear down to Powell. Powell had to let go of the rock and grab onto the underwear. He had to do it in an instant, and he would only have 1 chance. If he missed, he would fall to his death. Luck was on Powell's side. He grabbed hold of the underwear and hung on until George Bradley pulled him up to the ledge he was on. Later, back at camp, Bradley wrote in his diary, "Climbed the mountain this morning. Found it very hard one to ascend, but we succeeded at last. In one place, Major, having but 1 arm, couldn't get up, so I took off my drawers, and they made an excellent substitute for rope, and with that assistance, he got up safe." Powell and his men did not reach the Colorado River until July 17th. One day, Powell and his men discovered a small stream flowing into the Colorado. Powell named it Bright Angel Creek because the water was clear and bright compared to the muddy brown Colorado. Today, the main route from Grand Canyon Village down to the river is called Bright Angel Trail, as it ends right at this spot. Powell and his men were traveling through uncharted waters. They had no idea where they were going or what lay ahead. It was very dangerous. There were hundreds of wild rapids that could easily turn their boats into toothpicks and drown all the men. No one in Powell's group had any experience running rapids. Their boats were all wrong for the trip. They should have had light, flat-bottomed boats that would ride high in the water and glide over hidden rocks. Their boats, however, were heavy rowboats, rowboats called dories. Dories sat deep in the water and were hard to steer. Worst of all, the men rowed facing upstream. That meant they could not see where to steer when they hit rapids. Whenever possible, they portaged around dangerous rapids. Portaging means they carried the boats along the side of the canyon. After 3 months, they came to the most dangerous looking set of rapids yet. The canyon walls were sheer stone rising hundreds of feet. There was no way to portage. Right then and there, 3 men decided to leave the expedition. Powell tried to persuade them to stay, but they would not change their minds. So Powell said goodbye and wished them well. The men set off to hike out of the canyon and were never seen again. As luck would have it, Powell and the rest of his men had no difficulty getting through the rapids that day. Powell named the spot Separation Rapids in honor of the men who left him there. The following day, August 29, 1869, the Powell expedition reached the very western end of the Grand Canyon. Their journey was complete. Death in the Grand Canyon. Like any wilderness area, the Grand Canyon can be dangerous if a person is not careful. The rough count is now around 700 deaths since tourists started coming to the Grand Canyon in the 1870s. Many times people get hurt because they do not use common sense. They stand too close to the edge of the canyon and fall, or they don't take enough water on hikes. Animal attacks are very rare, and no one has ever died from a rattlesnake bite there. The worst disaster at the park took place in 1956. 2 airplanes collided over the canyon, killing all 128 passengers and crew. The 1869 trip was not the only one Powell made to the area. He returned to the canyon several times. In 1871, he brought a photographer with him, who took some of the very first pictures of the Grand Canyon. Powell kept a detailed journal of each trip and published the report. The book was called Exploration of the Colorado River of the West and its Tributaries. A tributary is a smaller river that flows into a bigger one. Powell became famous and gave many lectures about his adventures. His book brought lots of attention to the Grand Canyon. Before long, other Americans began exploring the canyon. Miners came searching for copper, gold, or lead. Prospecting the Grand Canyon was very difficult. Some of the miners gave up the hunt for metal and found a different way to make money. They started renting tents to tourists from back east. Before long, the tent village was replaced by hotels. In 1901, the Santa Fe Railroad ran a spur line to Grand Canyon Village. Now tourists could travel to the Grand Canyon easily instead of taking a bumpy 11-hour stagecoach ride from Flagstaff, Arizona. The railroad company also built a fancy hotel. It was called the El Tovar and is still in business. By 1919, more than 40,000 tourists had visited the Grand Canyon in 1 year.